Table for One, Episode 11, Arkham Horror, the card game. Hey everybody, welcome to Table for One. This is Episode 11. This is Anthony. I am back this week after a week-long fight against the child manifest crud that goes around this time of year.
Yo everybody, it's Jason. Hi guys.
All right, we are back this week. We are going to talk about probably the hottest new game that is out right now for solo gamers at least, and that is Arkham Horror, the card game. This is the newest in the long, long line of money-sucking machines out of Fantasy Flight Games that they like to call living card games. This one is a little bit different, and we'll get into that a little bit later, but it's designed for actual solo play. It is also designed for 2 players and 3 and 4 if you want to do it, but it actually works natively solo, and that's very unique as none of their other LCGs do that, including Lord of the Rings, which we're also going to talk about a little bit since these 2 games do have a lot in common. So this is a game that, we've both gotten to the table recently. We're going to talk a little bit about Arkham Horror, how it plays, give a quick overview, our thoughts on it. This isn't going to be a comprehensive review. If you've read anything about this game, you know that, like most of the LCGs, the initial core box is not really a complete experience. What you're getting is the initial investigators, all the cards you need to actually play the game, all the materials and resources, but all of the actual meat and potatoes of the challenge to the game are going to come later in the longer expansion packs that I think we're getting one actually this month in December. There's supposed to be that first one that drops. So we don't have to wait too long, but it is a little difficult to do a full review at this point.
The Dunwich Horror, I think it is, that first big box, and then there's a couple of smaller packs that are coming in there too.
Yeah, which is cool because sometimes these things come out and they make you wait a few months and you're stuck with very few cards, limited deck building options for weeks and weeks and weeks, and then you just kind of get bored with it. But not the case this time. So first things first, we're going to take a look at Arkham Horror, the card game. We're going to talk, I'm just going to run through real quick kind of how it plays, give our thoughts. The game is fairly simple, and if you've played Lord of the Rings, a lot of things will be a little familiar, and there's a good reason for that. Nate French, who is the original designer of Lord of the Rings, the living card game, was a co-designer on this game. So a lot of the same ideas were morphed and tweaked and streamlined into Arkham Horror to make it, a similar experience. But there's a lot of things that were changed too that kind of make it fit the Arkham model. So when you start playing the game, you're going to choose an investigator, and there's a handful of them that come in the box, but there's 2 that they'll recommend you start with. And then there are pre-built deck lists for those 2. So you just take all the numbered cards out based on whichever investigator you choose, and you're going to have 30 cards or so, and that's going to be your deck to start. Now, you can do some deck building. There are instructions in the rules on how to do that, but you don't have a lot of options in the core box, so you're not going to be able to change too many different things, at least not yet. And the interesting thing, we'll get to this later, is the deck building is not something you'll do every single time. You're just doing this as you build a character. So think along the lines of, an RPG, where you're building a character at the start of a campaign, but you're not going to do it every time you sit down for every session. So we're going to build that deck or use the pre-built one, pull out the scenario from the campaign, and kind of the same idea that you had in Lord of the Rings, where each of these different scenarios tells a piece of the story and they all kind of flow together, but ramped up to 11 because these flow together very smoothly. There's a lot of story and flavor text in the guide, in the campaign guide. There's also branching paths depending on whether you win or you lose, and then how you win or how you lose is also very important. So there's a lot of different things that are going to impact how you interact with these cards and kind of the decisions you make. And then the actual gameplay is pretty straightforward. Every round, you're going to pull resources, very similar to Lord of the Rings, and then you're going to take 3 actions from a long list of options. So you will be able to activate abilities, investigate, attack, move, play cards, all sorts of stuff you can do. You get to do 3 every round, and then once you've completed all 3 of those, you'll move on, and the enemies will have their chance to take actions followed by the upkeep, and then the Mythos phase, which should be familiar if you've played any Arkham games or anything in the Cthulhu-verse, is when you're going to get all the new enemies come out. And then the interesting thing here, and this is kind of a tweak on the way the quest cards and stuff work in Lord of the Rings, is that every time there's a Mythos phase, you're going to put a Doom token down on that card. So you're going to want to complete your act, the story part, the good part of the game, those cards, before the agendas are completed and you get to the end of that side. It's kind of a race against the clock, although you do get, at least in the initial scenarios, you do get a good amount of time to complete them. They do start to ramp up a lot faster as you move forward. So the game, to win, you got to complete the objectives, which are done through investigating and getting clues, putting those clues on your act cards, and to stay alive. So basically don't die and beat the clock. Like I said, there are different endings based on what you do. So you'll be moving around different locations, investigating, fighting different creatures and cultists, looking for different clues and solving little different, I won't say puzzles necessarily, but, basic idea, puzzle-y. And then once the game is over, depending on if you win or lose, you're going to get experience based on beating certain objectives or killing certain bad guys. And you'll be able to use that experience to upgrade your deck and to basically upgrade certain cards or purchase new cards that you add. So you'll notice on some cards, it'll have different white dots in the top left corner that indicate the level of the card. So you're able to take a card and then upgrade it to the exact same card, but with slightly better text. So you'll have a better effect that you can use in the future based on how much you're able to level up. So the idea of the game, and I'll throw this back here in a second so I'm not just monologuing, but the idea of the game being that every scenario you're growing, you are taking some of it with you. So if you lose, for example, you can take permanent damage or trauma that affects you either physically or mentally that might have an impact down the line. These things kind of all roll with you, and you'll be building and advancing your deck as you go too. So unlike Lord of the Rings, where you are building a new deck for basically every fresh challenge you run into, you are using a similar deck and just kind of building on it and tweaking it as you grow your character. So Jason, I know you had a chance to play this too. What were your thoughts as a whole?
Yeah, as a whole, I mean, I really enjoyed my play. I got to play it. I think I played the first scenario solo, and then I played the first scenario with a person who was kind of showing me. Then I went back and did it. It was really simple. I really enjoyed the quote unquote dice, which is that bag. It could be dice, but the fact that it's tokens in a bag kind of replicates dice, and it's almost like Rattlebones, where you take the dice and you can kind of mold them. This is what that does, and I like that a lot. So you can make it really easy for whatever. If you really want to just experience a story, you can make it just crushingly difficult and whatever, and anything in between. I like that a lot. And like you said, there wasn't really much to solve. It really is kind of a dicey fest, but I never really got the sense that you just froze and you just waited for good rolls or a good pull to happen. There's always kind of a clock ticking. There's always stuff to do. There's, slightly different ways to do it. And the cards really well illustrated, Fantasy Flight, you don't even have to talk about that. But they really felt like, you're in this place and then you go to another place, and the illustration and just the way it all worked and getting the clues just it really felt okay, like I'm playing, not necessarily in it, but I'm playing a good video game of it, So I'm going to this room and I'm going to that room, and there's the final room with this person and blah, blah, blah. Obviously, we're not kind of leaving out spoilers. So that sense of movement was there, and which is what you want in a story-based game. You want that, you feel like you are that character on a certain level, and that character is moving, and there's a difficulty level in accomplishing the roles, and then there's this luck factor as well. And I liked it a lot. It was really solid.
Yeah, I found it really interesting because the start of the game, especially the first couple times you're playing, you're just kind of trying to remember the mechanics and the flow of things and when certain things happen. It's not super complicated, but there's a lot of different actions to choose from and a lot of different keywords that you kind of have to look up here and there. But once I got into it and kind of got the feel of what I'm supposed to be doing, and it could kind of dive into the actual story and the cards and the progression as you move through the different locations and try to uncover the different things you're looking for, it got really engaging. And ironically, once I got to that point, I was able to better appreciate the mechanics because you could tell how well balanced it is. One of my main problems with a game like Arkham Horror, really a lot of the Arkham file stuff, is it can feel a little dicey and a little random at times, which can be fun in a group of friends where you're just sitting around, maybe watching TV in the background and just hanging out. But when you're playing a solo game, you don't want to get to that super random phase where you're like, well, if I pull the wrong one, the whole thing's over.
Yeah, especially a game like this, it's not short. You're going to be there a little while. Like if it's just 10, 15, maybe 20 minutes, luck is okay because you just kind of do it again. But you're there, what is it? I mean, my play took 40 minutes, maybe longer with a teach, that kind of thing. I don't know how long yours did.
Yeah, it sounds about right. I think it's probably going to clock in about an hour on average, especially as they get a little more complicated in the future.
Yeah. Yeah, this was like the basic bare bones, like just go here, do this, fetch this bear pelt or whatever. And that took 40 minutes. So I can imagine something longer, more involved. You're reading a lot of the cards. You're there at least an hour. You do not want just a dice fest for that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it would be so easy for that to have happened. So I'm really thankful that they managed to find a way to balance the skill checks in a way that is interesting, but most importantly, in a way that I can mitigate as much as I need to.
Right. And I like that so this is another thing why the bag thing as opposed to dice is really cool. Like you can put in these tokens, which, so to talk about the bag, it's like this. It's basically mostly it's -1 chips, -2 chips, 0 chips, maybe +1 chip if you're playing that difficulty. But there's also these other chips you can pull, and they change from scenario to scenario. So you pull a chip and, your character loses a sanity. You pull a chip and if there are ghouls out, so you can kind of, there's a ghoul out. I'm going to kill that ghoul so that when I pull that chip, he doesn't do anything. That was a really nice way to kind of take what is a randomness element and make you make decisions, like real decisions around it.
Yeah, absolutely. And the cool thing, too, about that is it changes based on difficulty, too. Like, you flip that card over and they do something different if you put it up on hard mode. It takes a game that's very story-based and makes it highly replayable, I think, because not only do you have the different investigators, if you want to try something a little bit different, but you can change the difficulty, and they show you exactly which chips you need to throw in that bag based on the difficulty you want to run. But also, just flip the card over. It makes it a little bit different in terms of what's going to happen when you pull those certain chips. Very, very interesting. And because you know everything that's in that bag and you know the odds of it coming out because they all go back every time, you can plan for it, and you push your luck a little bit, but you can also make sure, like, all right, I'm just going to buff my guy up, his skill up enough to make sure I can handle a -3 because I really need to beat this. And then you know that you have a 65% chance. Whereas if it's like, it doesn't matter too much, I don't care. Like if I don't make this skill check, it's not the end of the world. I'll save these buffs for later. You get to make those decisions, which I think is very, very cool.
Right. Like the character that I had, I think is the suggested starter character. Their power is they can replace a chip if they discard a card. So it creates decisions like, okay, I can play all these cards now and make something happen in the short term, or I could hold on to these cards as a resource to ensure block against bad pulls. I'm always looking for, even in a dice fest, I'm always looking for, like you said, that mitigation, but also smart decisions. You're still deciding stuff. You're not just waiting, you're just at the whim of the randomness. And I think they strike that balance really well.
To me, going back to Gen Con when they announced this, that's what it would take for this to succeed. It needed to find a way to offset the randomness of so many other Arkham games, especially Arkham Horror is what it's based on. And not only do they do that, but they really find a way to make it interesting and engaging in a way that this is not typically something that I enjoy, like this particular theme. And I was pulled in pretty quickly. I was surprised. So they really managed to pull it all together in a nice way.
Yeah, I'd recommend it if people can kind of find it within their means to get into it, stick their toe in the water. They get thumbs up from me.
Yeah, I'm with you. So the other thing we wanted to talk about real quick, and this is by no means a Lord of the Rings LCG episode or review, because that is a whole nother beast unto itself. That is a game. We were talking about this before the episode, actually. This is a game where I did actually look up at one point what it would cost to fill out my collection of these cards, and it was at least $1,200 beyond what I've already paid for.
It's so there's a thread, I found it on BGG. It's from January 2015. Thank you to user Party Hats, who estimated the cost of Lord of the Rings whole set $1,159.20.
Ridiculous.
And that's January. I mean, they're cycles have come out this year, and that's just higher since then. So if you're looking to get into Lord of the Rings, good luck to you.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, any given year adds like $300 to that total. So yeah, it's expensive if you really want to have everything. Now the good thing is you don't need to have everything, because it takes a long time to go through all of it. So Lord of the Rings LCG, if you have not played it or been exposed to it in any way somehow as a solo gamer, it is fairly similar to Arkham card game and what we just described. You have a number of heroes. Instead of just one investigator, you'll have 3 heroes that form your deck, and they each have different spheres of influence, and then you'll pull cards into your deck based on those spheres, and that's going to determine how you play them. Every round, you're going to add resources to each of those characters, which you can then spend to play different cards, and you'll be building out a tableau to then fight the different bad guys that come at you. The bad guys will come at you based on your threat level. You start the game with a certain threat level based on whatever your heroes are. The more powerful they are, the higher threat level starts, and then the enemies will engage with you at certain points based on those threat levels. The goal of the game is to explore different locations and perform different tasks that allow you to move through the scenario. So it'll be very similar to Arkham in that there's multiple scenario cards, and you have to move your way through them. And as you get past the initial handful of campaigns in the early boxes, there are all sorts of different mechanics and tweaks and changes that alter the game and what you're supposed to do. Sometimes you lose a character. Sometimes you have to find certain items in the deck. Sometimes you have to beat certain creatures. Sometimes you have hobbits who are running around, not really helping too much, but burgling as they might too. There are saga expansions that allow you to play through both the Hobbit and the Lord of the Rings trilogy. The actual game itself, the core game, doesn't go through the main saga. It goes through just kind of this separate story that's been built for it. So this is kind of the iconic card game of solo play, if only because it has so much content. It's been out for 5-6 years now, going back to 2011. There are, I don't have the number in front of me, but dozens of different packs. Obviously, when you're looking at over $1,000 to get everything.
Yeah, I'm looking at just so you give you guys a sense. We're looking at 6 saga expansion packs, 5 standalone scenarios, 24 nightmare decks, and obviously the base game, and a couple of other kind of side things from there. So you're looking at a lot of content.
It is tremendous volume. I think I have well over 1,000 cards, and I only have the first cycle at half. So you would need several boxes to house everything, and hundreds of dollars for sleeves. So the interesting thing about Lord of the Rings card game is that it is for 1 to 2 players, but and as someone who's played this solo several times, it's not really designed for solo play out of the box. And now thousands of solo gamers will tell you otherwise, but you really end up having to play it with multi-hands. And anytime you have to play a game multi-handed, it's not really designed for solo play, because multi-handing it's just a little awkward. It's always a little awkward. You're handling so much stuff at the same time.
Especially the way the Lord of the Rings works, because you don't just have one character, you have 3. So they work together, but you're still managing all 3 of those characters, which is, so you're multi-hand, you have 2 hands, but really you're governing 6 characters.
Yeah, it gets messy, and you lose track of things, and you forget where the resources go, and you can You
who's
can,
tapped and who's fighting who's engaged with who, and who's trying to get to the quest. Like,
yeah, don't do what I do and play it on the floor, then things get all messed up. Because then, like, wait, where did this enemy go? Because he was engaged with somebody, but these guys are all in one big giant line, so I don't know. You could waste a good hour of time there. But the interesting thing about this game is you can play it with one hand. You could play just 3 heroes, but it is brutally difficult if you do. Just brutally difficult. Like some of these scenarios you just cannot beat unless you have 2 hands, and even then they're pretty hard. So it just makes it interesting because you have that factor. I love it. I've played this game a lot, and I do have a lot of the different adventure packs, and I played through quite a few of the different scenarios. But it never did feel like a perfect solo game just because of kind of the tweaks you had to make and all the different, management you had to do. The other really interesting factor that some people love and some people hate, I'm kind of in the middle on it, is the deck building. With Lord of the Rings, you kind of have to build a new deck, I'd say 50-60% of the time. Each of these scenarios is designed to be very unique and custom and challenging in its own special way. So it's a lot like playing, World of Warcraft, where you go into a raid, you all die, and you're like, oh, okay, that's what we need to do. And then you go back and you do it again, and maybe you die again, but at least you kind of have a strategy. It's very similar to that. The first time through, you're just going to lose because you don't know what you're supposed to do, and you don't know what you're up against. Then you go build a deck that you think is going to combat what you just ran into. That aspect of the game, some people love it because you're building new decks, you're trying new things, you're always tweaking and adjusting. Some people hate it because they just want to sit down and play a game. And I think I sometimes fall into the latter, not the hate part, but just I don't play the game as much because I just want to sit down and play a game, and I don't feel like building a deck right now, and I don't have a deck for the next scenario that I'm about to play, so I'm just like, meh, I'll do something else. And I think a lot of people fall in that boat. Is this a game you've had a chance to play very much?
I haven't played it too much. To be honest with you, I'm not a big fan of this, and there's a couple reasons why, but I think it's not necessarily the Lord of the Rings like the actual game itself. I think there are some pitfalls of the LCG model in general that I guess we could just kind of save that for the next section or whatever we'll talk about.
Okay, yeah. I think that's fair. For most solo gamers, when I talk to people, they either love this or they fall on the other side where it's just not worth getting into. I was on the latter for a while just because it was intimidating and kind of dragged myself in. But I don't even feel like I'd give it a glowing review necessarily. I do like the game a lot, but it's not something that I pull out super frequently.
It's not something I'm eager to go back into, to be honest with you. I think part of it is just the massive cost. This you're looking at, and yeah, I know you could go into the base game, but if just like with Arkham Horror, just kind of comparing the two, there's you get into the base game and you move through it and then you're kind of done. It's replayable, but I think you need the extra cards of the packs to really get the best replayability out of it. So that's again it's my criticism of both the LCG system in general more than Arkham or Lord of the Rings in particular.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And I don't think you could enjoy the Lord of the Rings base game by itself playing solo. You really need at least 3 or 4 adventure packs to build out decks a little bit, and probably 1 or 2 of the deluxe expansions or saga expansions. So yeah, you're looking at $100 just to kind of get into the game. That's a lot to ask somebody to do.
Mm-hmm.
So, with that, I think we can kind of dive into the LCG model in general. And that's kind of why I wanted to pull Lord of the Rings into this, because it's the linchpin. It's the one everybody looks to. And Arkham is kind of coming in looking to usurp that as maybe the solo gamer game of choice as a card game. But before you invest in that, before you dive headfirst into what is admittedly a very good game in Arkham, we kind of wanted to discuss, does LCG model work? Does it make good sense for solo gamers? And in general, the kind of cost, when is it worth it?
Hmm. So my thinking about the LCG model, and this is the best thing that I'll say about both Arkham and Lord of the Rings, the games, is that it gives you that sense of an episodic TV show. So a lot of people said that Pandemic Legacy it felt like a great TV show from start to end, but it was a season. Like, you're playing one season, that's it, you're done, and whatever. This one, it feels more like it really feels like a multi-season event. Like, I can talk about the Lord of the Rings, or I could talk about, I guess, Arkham Horror, this kind of first part of it, and I almost feel like I'm binging a Netflix show. Or I'm going through multiple seasons of things, and there's different things that happen in each season, and there's different things that happen, within, like, episodes, quote unquote. And you have that added experience that you can, like, with the World of Warcraft raid thing, like, you can almost rewind the episode and play the episode in a different way. But if for people who like that, where a solo game might be just this kind of one replayable experience over and over again, if that appeal to you of like binging a Netflix show, if that's really kind of how you consume entertainment, then the LCG model probably does it better than anything that I can think of.
Yeah, so I mean, the cost of LCGs, it's tough to justify if you're not going to play through them, and that's why I haven't kept up with any of these. I want to buy the cards. I'm a bit of a completionist. I got the acquisition is sort of strong, but when you're looking at, $10-15 a month, plus those deluxe expansions twice a year, plus if you want the Nightmare stuff and everything else, and the custom special stuff and the convention exclusive, it just adds up real fast. And just getting to the point where you can justify all that expense, like actually just playing the one game. If you can do that, if you really want to dig in and play something on a campaign level, then awesome, because these are designed for that and you're going to love it. But in my experience, for myself and for a lot of people I talk to, it just doesn't happen all that often. So it's hard to commit to that.
Yeah, I mean, like, I said it was like a Netflix show in a way, but it's not in another way because of the pricing. And like a Netflix subscription show, you're paying $10-11 a month, and you're getting that, and you're getting all sorts of other content as well, or Hulu or whatever it is. That $11 a month is really going pretty far, and you're paying $16 a month for something, and that's it. You're not getting anything else. It's not like you're getting access to other Fantasy Flight games. How awesome would it be to just like pay one subscription a month and you get your Game of Thrones pack, you get your Lord of the Rings pack, your Arkham Horror pack. Like, that would be something I'd be really interested in. That'd be kind of innovative, actually, because it is that model of I'm playing this episodic thing out, but that's not what's really happening. It's just, here you go, lay out $17. Here's a pack that'll last you, a couple weeks, a month, longer if you're into it, which is great if you're into it. But I think you're okay with the base set, or just to experience it, and then kind of moving on.
Yeah, and unless it really grabs you, in which case, if you really, really want to keep playing, and it just makes it really tough, like you said, because if you got more content, if it was somehow actually, like you're subscribing to, the Fantasy Flight channel or something, or if this was a digital game where they could do that, where they could offer all this content kind of as part of a subscription. And even like on the competitive side, I can almost see it too. Like if you're playing a game like Game of Thrones competitively and you're buying the new decks every month, and this is the only game you play, it doesn't really add up to that much money in the long term. Compare it to something like Magic, where you're spending hundreds of dollars a month. It makes sense. But for a game you're going to play by yourself, that's tough.
That's the big difference. So, actually, the Game of Thrones, it has the thread I'm on is the first edition. That's actually more expensive. It's like over $1,200 to get all that Game of Thrones content. But ask any Magic player, and they're like, $1,200. Ha! I spend that on 3 cards or whatever it is. And maybe this is a case of like board gamers, because I think we're both board gamers primarily, like we're cheap compared to Magic players. A store will, they'll invite board gamers in, but their bread and butter is those Magic players who are just laying out that money, boom, 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 boom. And I could see in a competitive mode where there's all these combinations and things kind of arise from the interaction, there be a lot of content that it justifies the cost. We're talking about a solo experience where it's you against an AI basically, and that AI, like, once you kind of figure out how to beat it, is not going to react to you. It's not going to make you, get more cards or whatever it is. You're really in it for the story. And if you want to spend that much money on a story and you're very happy with like that kind of episodic content, I kind of relate it to, if you know the Dresden Files, I relate it to that. So it's like, a book every year, and that's the story kind of keeps on progressing. And if you're happy with that end of things, then yeah, sure, go for it. Like, thinking about it, you pay whatever it is, $17 for a novel every year. Are you, and then the game, the Arkham Horror game comes out, and it's going to cost you, what is it, like $50-$60? If you can kind of justify that cost, that difference, and the gameplay mechanical experience makes up the difference in that experience for you, then absolutely, by all means, have a blast. I think it's a worthy thing for you to go for. But that's the only thing. That's the only scenario in which I can see it kind of being justified. I don't think this game is mechanically rich enough. It's good, but it's not like, these aren't the best mechanics I've ever experienced. And the story, this isn't War and Peace. It's pulpy, it's actiony. And if you like it, you love it. But I don't see myself getting into the full experience of the Arkham game. I'll definitely play the first round of it, and so that we can have our larger discussion, maybe a couple some spoilers in there or something like that. But after that, I'm I think I'm good.
Yeah, I'm kind of on the fence too. I mean, it's having played this initial core set, and with the first deluxe expansion just around the corner, and play through that, and then got this werewolf expansion that came out at Arkham Knights. That's a lot of content, and I feel like that's a good amount, enough for me to get a good sense of what the game's going to be like. Thus far, I'm not so blown away that I absolutely 100% need to know what happens next and see all the stories, and I'm willing to spend, $10 to $20 a month to make it happen. We'll see. That could change with more of it, but it's hard for me to conceive of a situation in which that would be the case when there's so many other solo games on my shelves already, that don't have that subscription model, and that I can a lot of times play with other people. I mean, you can play Arkham with other people too, but it's a little more limited in that respect. So it's an interesting model, and I know some people love it and are absolutely going to invest in it and have a lot of fun with it, and good for you. I mean, that's fantastic, and I think it's the kind of game you really could get into and have a lot of fun with and play in the long term.
And what I'll say is, like, I'm glad it's there. I'm glad that there's different takes on solo games. I'm glad that there's giant solo games that take 3-4 hours. I'm glad that there's tiny games that take 20 minutes. I'm glad that there's luck and strategy. And this is a definite new take, a unique take that Netflix, seasons of episodes, that kind of thing. I'm glad it's there, and I'm glad that if I had that option, if I had that want, that I have options to kind of indulge that. It's just at this point in time, not really my bag, but I definitely see other people just really falling in love with that kind of experience.
All right, so there you have it. Our initial thoughts on Arkham Horror, the card game, kind of comparison there with Lord of the Rings as well, and the LCG model in general. And we'll see how it plays out over the next few months and years, and how long this one sticks around, too, with a primarily story-driven model. But for this week, that's everything. And, if you have any thoughts yourself, if you've played through the Arkham Horror card game, if you are obsessed with Lord of the Rings, if you want to kind of defend the LCG model as it stands for solo gamers in general, hit us up. You can hit us on boardgamersanonymous.com or on the Guild on Board Game Geek or on Facebook, where we'll post this episode and you can reply in the thread there. But definitely want to hear from you, especially if you're really into these games and you play them a lot, because we're playing them obviously, but we're not so heavily invested that we kind of have that down the rabbit hole mindset of pulling all this different kind of content together for one of these LCGs. But that is everything for this week. In the meantime, make sure you check out all those things I just mentioned: Facebook, Twitter, BoardGamersAnonymous.com, Board Game Geek. If you have a chance, stop on by iTunes, leave us a quick review. We'd love that. Helps more people find the podcast. And of course, if you have not yet, make sure you sign up for the Board Gamers Anonymous newsletter, which you can do on the website. Every month we pull a winner. They get $10 to a website of their choice. And it's as easy as that. You just have to be on the list. All right. But for this week, that's going to be everything. And thank you again, Jason, for being on the show.
All right. My pleasure.
All right, guys. And until next week, we will save you a seat at this table for 1 and or 2, depending on the week.
Later, everybody.